I would like to tell you a story that happened to my cousin sister. Right now at this moment, I'm kind of afraid to tell this, because still, I can't believe this really happened to my cousin sister. This story, I heard this weird story from her last Chuseok, when our relatives and families all gathered together. So I thought we were going to have fun. But I heard this story from her. And before I tell you the story, let me just tell you the background where she lived. She lived in a very small town of Suwon. There were houses, and full of houses. But then recently, all these houses were developed. They turned into high buildings, 3-story high houses. But only my cousin's house remained as a house, and also the next door neighborhood. And there were the mother and the father living next to the neighborhood. And they didn't really have any communication together, so they rarely see each other. But you know, from 3 days ago, when she was about to sleep at night, she could hear this sound, a crying of a girl that sounded like, but this crying, it sounded like it was a crying for help. She was desperate. But you know, she can only hear this sound if the neighborhood was living next door. But there wasn't any child. It was only the mother and the father. So she thought it was weird. But she just went back to sleep. But this continued 3 days. One day, when she came back from her home, you know, she had a wonderful day, but she seemed so exhausted. So she felt like she was in a deep sleep. She went back to sleep. But then suddenly, she felt really cold, as if this was a cold that happened in the winter night. And she suddenly heard this crying, similar crying that she had been hearing for 3 days. But then the sound was too loud, as if it was in front of her. So she was so nervous. She opened her eyes, lying down, and you know what? When she looked up, she could see this girl seeing down like this from her. And she was rubbing her eyes so fast that she couldn't even see her eyes. And she wouldn't stop doing this. She was so afraid. She wanted to get out, but she realized her body was paralyzed. She can't even move. She can't even shout. She's repeated this every time, but it didn't help. She was sweating. She was so wet, but she couldn't get out of the situation. All she could see was this girl just rubbing her eyes so fast. But then when she looked closer at the ceiling for the girl, she stopped for a second. And when she saw her eyes, it was totally empty. Her eyes was just, there wasn't anything. It was totally empty. But then she wanted to get out of the situation so badly. But then she was too tired, so she just fell asleep. In the morning, she went to her mom, which was my aunt. Mom, you know what happened last night? I had this terrible nightmare. You wouldn't believe me. Oh yeah, by the way, is your eyes okay? What do you mean? I mean, because last night you came to me and said that, I mean, you were coming to me and you were rubbing your eyes and you said that it was so painful. But then, she couldn't get out of her bed. It wasn't her. So she thought it was weird. She suddenly thought maybe it's the girl that she's seen from the ceiling. The next day, when she saw the news, a girl was actually killed by their parents. But then she was killed by a brick thrown in her eyes, hit so badly, and she got killed. But then she realized it was the girl that she saw in her nightmare. Maybe when she first heard the crying, maybe the girl was asking her for help. And still, after hearing this story, I can't even go back to bed too. And this is my end of the story. Thank you.